The recording of this, and we'll carry on. Okay, so let's give it a shot. All right, so Coke hires you and they're sure Pepsi did it. So now what? This happens a lot. People hire you and they're sure right from the start, it's my hated enemy doing it to me. Yeah, consider alternate theories. Your client is sure who did it, but unless they have convincing proof, you should consider that they're wrong and blaming the usual suspects. And this is why you always need good social skills, because you may have to tell them something they don't want to hear. Like, it wasn't your hated enemy that did this, it was something else. So Mint got hacked and customers are downloading infected files. What should you do? All these are, this one's real. This really happened a few years ago. Linux got hacked and people are downloading infected copies of Mint. So this is an emergency. You have to immediately stop it. Take down the website, down for maintenance. You don't want to let people continue to download infected files. You want to stop that. All right. All right, the database server logs show suspicious queries, and the administrator wants to image the storage area network. What should you do? Yeah, you need other sources of evidence. That's way too much evidence from one place. Logs would be much more logical. And like that story, it might be that there's nothing wrong with the database server at all. The problem could be somewhere else. So taking a huge amount of data and digging through it might be wasting time that you could have more valuable spend somewhere else. All right, your CEO demands that you hack the attacker back. Another thing that happens all the time. What should you do now? This is very common. There are interesting books about it. There's a book about this. I read it. It's a very interesting book. Okay, do it but use Tor. No, don't do it. The point is you're committing a crime, although I've had students that in fact did that. Do it but use Tor. The best thing is tell them, I'm not going to do that. You're not authorized to do that. However, when China hacked Google, Google hacked them back and stole all their stuff, and the Secret Service was on the case. And I talked to Secret Service officers who were there, and they said, yeah, we told them not to do that, but they did it. And it turned out to be very valuable. They found 30 other American companies' data on their server and notified them, but it was illegal. But of course, nobody's going to prosecute you in China, apparently. You're taking some legal risk by doing that, but Google can afford to hire lawyers and everything. You know, an average independent contractor, you don't want to get in this world of pain. If you're, that's the thing. You could do an illegal thing if you consult with your lawyer and consider the risk, consider the consequences. There are times, but certainly don't do it casually. There are times when you accept some legal risk to do something you have to do, but not normally. All right, I'm going to shut this so it stops playing music. All right, and we can carry on with some more of this. All right, so let me just check the comments and see if anything's bad. Like, okay, good. They say it's good. I hope that's true. Mine seems to freeze up, but anyway, I'll check back now and then. Let me know if you can't see the slides. So live collection is your number one most common tool, which is getting volatile evidence. You're getting simple things like logs and file listings. It doesn't have much effect on the system. It doesn't take much processing time. It doesn't cause it to crash or anything, but it's also not a complete record. But it's the stuff that's easy to get quickly. So if there's any reason to think that volatile information is useful, then you want to collect it from the RAM. If you can run it in a good manner, it would be nice. If the number of infected systems is large, then you really don't want to do anything too complicated on a lot of systems. And of course, this is very common. Forensic duplications would take a long amount of time or possibly fail. There may be other legal considerations that make it wise to preserve as much data as possible, like that one where there was $180,000 being stolen. You wanted to take a complete image of that machine, even if you're not going to analyze it right away, because you might have to go to court and say, here's all the evidence. So test your live response first to make sure that your script is working and doesn't cause crashes or anything. And make sure you got approval for whatever you're doing. Usually it's company machines, and all you need is approval from the company. But if you're going to be imaging personal machines, you need permission from those people. And there's a huge problem now that almost everybody uses the same laptop for both personal and work, and the same phone for both personal and work, which greatly complicates the legality of this. And maybe 8 years ago, when portable devices became popular, a lot of companies tried to force everybody to have two separate devices, and they learned nobody will put up with that. Like Hillary Clinton's not the president because she wouldn't carry two phones. Nobody is willing to do that pretty much, and they all just accepted the difficult complexity that comes from everybody using the same device for two purposes, and now it's not clear that you're allowed to collect evidence from that device because it has personal stuff on it as well. And you just accept giving your legal department more of a headache and your IT department more of a headache, because they've learned that if you don't let people use their portable devices at work, all the good people will leave and work somewhere else. Because they're really much more productive using their iPhone on the airplane and everywhere. Anyway, now any live response is in principle a sloppy thing to do, because you're running software on the supposed evidence machine, changing it, so the evidence you get includes some changes that were made by the investigation. But of course, to be fair, computer forensic investigators are the only people that ever thought evidence could be perfect. In the old days, the rule was kick out the plug, do an abnormal power down, image the hard drive, and you now have perfect evidence, and you have a MD5 hash, and you can reproduce it, and it's 100% perfect. That's what they were. You lose all the volatile data, but the image of the hard drive itself was considered the only thing important, because the RAM doesn't have date stamps or owners. So you really don't know how that data got there or what it means. So they got used to saying you have these perfect images and you work from these perfect images. But if you think about it, every other field of forensics has already had this. If you analyze blood splatters, you have to wipe up some of the blood and analyze it. If you analyze a dead body, you have to cut it open. You're always altering the evidence while investigating it. Every other field of forensics accepts this, so computer people now are the same. Yes, some of the data I get from this machine is from what I did, and some of it is what the other people did, and I have to be intelligent enough to tell the difference. We're just in the same boat as everybody else. So you can make a script, a batch script in DOS or Bash or Perl, anything you like, a script that just gathers whatever data, lists all the files, lists all the processes, lists all the registry keys, and so on. What we're going to do is use Velociraptor, our number one tool. It has a whole bunch of really useful scripts that will harvest all the data you normally want from the machines. So you want to find a tool that's accepted, that it actually handles all the operating systems you're using. If it runs only on Windows and you have Linux machines, then you're going to have to deal with that. Also be aware that it's best practice not to use the OS's executables. Don't trust them because they could have been poisoned. Bring in your own copy of the executables you're going to run. So make sure you collect the important data. Make sure the collection doesn't take too long. They say less than an hour for a system. Velociraptor by default is limited to 2 minutes. Anything that would take longer than 2 minutes, it doesn't run. And make sure that you can easily understand the output. So you collect the running state, network connections, running processes, the logs, file listings and system logs to record what happened in the past. Some people go off the deep end. They always collect the entire RAM or the entire hard disk, but the problem is that's way too much data to analyze for most purposes. It's better to collect data you can actually use right away. So you want the system time and date, the OS, the general information about the system, especially programs that automatically run, because that's usually where the malware is, tasks that are scheduled to run at certain times, all the user accounts, because there may be, you want to know when people have been logging in, you want to see if a new user account has been created, things like that. You want all the network information, the routing table, the DNS cache, where's this thing been going? Some of that may be command and control servers or attacker machines. You want all the drivers, files, running processes, user login history. And of course, the system logs, installed software, file system listing, and all the jazz. These are all things that are easy to get quickly, and they are not an overwhelming amount of information. You can collect complete RAM capture. That's not something you normally do, but if you want to, there are tools that do this for you. There are very, very specialized tools available. So again, as always, practice on a test system, learn how it works. Consider what you'll do if you expect to copy it to a USB drive. The machine might have a broken USB drive or something, so that might be an issue you'll have to figure out how to cope with. And of course, everything you examine might have malware on it. So therefore, all the evidence you gather might have malware in it, and the machines you analyze it on might get infected, so you have to be aware of that. And any credentials used to log in might go to the bad guy because they might be in current control of that machine, logging all the data that goes on it. So you don't just log in with the global system administrator credentials on a possibly infected machine. So here's the most important thing I mentioned before, because I've done this kind of work. Whatever you do, document it. Keep notes of what you're doing. I learned this because I was working at a financial company and I was handling huge amounts of money, and then the phone would ring. I'd be halfway through doing something like restructuring a database. Then the phone would ring and they'd have an emergency. I'd have to do something else for a few hours. Then I would come back and have to figure out exactly where I was. So I learned to keep a log of every step so I could pick up exactly where I left off. And that's what you have to do. Record everything you did so you can take those notes to court. If you do something wrong, record it. Admit it. Yes, I did this. It later turned out that was the wrong thing to do. That's the only thing you can say. Don't lie. Don't cover anything up. Just keep everything. And remember, you don't interact with the suspect computer any more than you have to. Use tools that minimize the impact on the system. Generally, avoid graphical tools because they use up more memory. And normally you want to use tools that create a log and make a checksum of the output so you can verify the log hasn't been altered. And I went online and found an interesting website that compared the acquisition software for digital forensic purposes, and I was very surprised. The standard, the one I learned on, the one I mostly use, is FTK Imager. And here's how popular. There's a lot of other alternative products used to capture RAM, and it turns out that even though FTK Imager is the most famous and the standard, it is also the worst. Here's how much RAM it uses. That's FTK, and these others use much less. Like Belkasoft Live RAM Capture is very low here. So apparently it's a sloppy tool that does a lot more damage to the machine than it needs to. And if you look at the libraries and registry keys, it also does a whole lot of that it doesn't need to do. Other tools use much less. So I guess it was an early tool, and it's kind of sloppy. Anyway, that's the thing. Here's the 117 megs used here, but the others are using only like 18 and 13. So anyway, that's interesting. All right, so anyway, the recommended procedure is to fully automate the process. This is good, and you should collect data in order of volatility. Get the RAM data first, get the hard drive data later, because that'll last longer. Treat this stuff as evidence. Whatever you get, you should have a chain of custody and like a checksum, so you can eventually go to court if that's a possibility. And like I say, consider anything you connect to that machine as lost to the attacker. So don't connect anything that has secrets on it or passwords you care about or anything. Credentials, don't modify the suspect computer any more than you have to. And don't analyze on the suspect computer, tapping, running programs on it and everything. You gather the data and then you analyze the data elsewhere. That's the right way to do it. Go ahead.
How do you prevent from some malware that you transport to another machine to affect that other machine?
Well, you absolutely do get the malware because you harvest the whole hard drive, and the malware is part of the investigation. But when you analyze it, you normally analyze it without running it. You use a tool like FTK full analysis or Encase, and then you can mount that and look at all the files, but none of them are running, so it won't spread. However, if you have to run it, you run it in a virtual machine, and then the malware will run, and you might do that. Because you might do that because you want to examine what the malware does, or because you want to use some programs on that machine that your analysis tool can't understand. Like they might have some weird word processor, and the only thing you can do is run your image of the suspect machine to run it. So these are all techniques you can use, and they all have certain risks and drawbacks. But anyway, you don't run the malware except in a contained virtual machine. And I'll be teaching a malware analysis class next semester. We talk about this, how to set up a machine, and you do analyze running malware, but you keep it off your main machine. And a good practice is what I do, have a Mac and put a Windows virtual machine on it. Then even if it went down to the Mac, it wouldn't be able to infect the Mac. So, yeah, anyway. And Linux, you could use Linux too, and that would be pretty good. Anyway, so here's a few horror stories. They copy a live response toolkit to the systems, collect the data back on the same system, storing it on the hard drive, thus doing a lot of damage to that system. Another one, remotely log in with domain administrator accounts and run tools. And there's the old-fashioned one everybody used to do. Pull out the plug, image the hard drive, and that's it. And that was fine 15 years ago when the malware came in on floppy disks and lived on the hard drive, but now it lives in memory, and you lost all that. All right, so good methods. You have a network share, for example, with throwaway credentials not used for any other purpose. You have a read-only folder containing the tools and a writable folder where you put the output. So you copy your tools down from the network and you copy the evidence back out over the network. This is a pretty good method. And that's essentially what our Velociraptor is going to do for us. So you browse to the share, run a live response directly from the share. Once it's complete, it sends it up to the server, and that's the game. Your evidence server should be isolated from the internet, so people shouldn't be doing internet work on it. And you let people connect to it and log whoever's been going on there. That's a common thing. And of course, your acquisition software has to have administrator credentials to copy everything off the machine. That's a. This is, by the way, I happen to know this how the FBI does it. They gather data and they put it on a. So there are technicians that just gather data. They just image machines and they put it on a server, and the investigators connect over the internet to the server and investigate it in the cloud. This is a pretty effective technique, although they have pretty serious passwords and two-factor authentication to make sure nobody else is getting at it, because that's real important, of course. You don't want other people getting it because it's confidential, and you don't want other people altering it because you need to go to court. But that's a pretty good way. So your investigator has access to the data, and your technicians that are going to the scene gathering evidence are not worrying about the investigation. They're just technicians making sure they got all the hard drives and such. So you got some computers cannot connect to external media, so you might bring in your stuff on a CD-ROM. You might make an encrypted network tool, like CryptCat or S-Tunnel are tools that will just make an encrypted connection to another machine. There's a lot of ways to do it. SCP will do it on Linux, probably on Windows by now. And sometimes you have something with a screwy OS, usually a cell phone or an IoT device, where none of your tools will work. And then, you do whatever you can. Like I've mentioned, there are people who've gone to court, like they get a cell phone, and they can't connect it to any fancy thing, so they just page through the text messages and take pictures with a camera. That's evidence. You didn't get all the evidence, but it's evidence. I mean, the real evidence is always the human testifying. Say, I was there, it was on there, I took this picture. The real evidence is the human. Any imperfect, sloppy procedure might be all you can do or good enough. So, all right, you create a checklist of your automated steps, test them on a clean system if possible, and then perform your steps. Try to be as organized as you can, but this is a thing, something always goes wrong, and this is why you keep a log. And make sure you record what you really did. Even if you later decide it wasn't the right thing to do, you got to make sure you can testify what you really did. All right, and if you can automate it, that's much better. Then that's more likely to be consistent. You can pass it on to lower level staff. It's a lot better to have automated processes, and that's why we're going to use Velociraptor, which automates it nicely. All right, let's take a look at another Kahoot. And I can see the chat, so I know there's no people complaining right now. Good. That's the problem with this remote stuff. Sometimes something is wrong and I don't even know. This is home theater, amateur theater stuff. But it has the advantage that nobody can pressure a CEO and force me to stop talking about this. That's why, logically, those late night comics should have been on streaming anyway, where they're going to reach more people and where there isn't as easy a way to put pressure on them. That's why, I heard some people commenting on Jimmy Kimmel getting nuked. They say, he was going to get fired anyway. This whole TV thing is not making any money. It doesn't reach enough people. It's out of date. Almost nobody in the audience is under the age of 60. It's kind of all dead anyway. I don't have a TV. I haven't had a TV in 20 years. I watch it on YouTube. Everybody does. So this whole idea of having 100 staff work on this show in the building in New York City and the big cameras and everything is just ridiculous. I mean, there's 180 people making the Colbert show, and I know Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway have an entire staff of 15, and they make a lot more money. So it is just not, broadcast TV is over. And however, it's also abusive of the government to pressure them into shutting it down. But in fact, it was going to go down anyway.
How many people do your podcast? How big's your team?
Well, I have no team at all, but my podcast is nothing. I only have 100 viewers, so I don't make any money. But Sarah Swisher and Scott Gallagher are making like $20 million a year. They're one of the top podcasts in the world, and their whole staff is 15. And Keith Olbermann, his podcast makes a pile of money, and his team is just him and his dogs. That's it. So you can make a podcast with no team at all and no equipment at all, just a laptop. Whereas it costs millions to run those TV studios with the makeup and all that fancy stuff.
And the several layers of permission they have.
Oh yeah, and marketing and theater people making backgrounds and all that jazz. I mean, it makes a really classy looking product, but it's not justified by the money you make, not anymore. So anyway, all right, let's give it a shot. All right, the suspect reinstalled their laptop's OS to hide evidence. So what should you collect? This is another true story. Most of these are true stories. Yep, collect the hard drive image. This happened to one of my forensic teachers. They came in to get the evidence, and they said, oh, my attorney bought the laptop from me and reinstalled the OS. And he said, that's fine, I'll just image it anyway, because the reinstalling the OS does not erase the data. It only, if your OS only occupies a small portion of the disk, it only overwrites the data where it wrote on there. The other data where you didn't write still has the old data on it. If you take a forensic tool, you can recover deleted files. And so most of the data is still on there, and that's why they settled the case when they heard him say it. They said, uh-oh, we're screwed. They thought, now you can wipe it. There is a forensic wiping process that takes hours, but if you don't do that, just copying some files or defragging or something only gets a small portion of the data. Most of it is still there. So anyway, all right. Although these days it would probably be an SSD, and that would probably not be true, because SSDs mostly do forget, but hard drives do not forget. And not all SSDs forget either. It depends on whether you have the most updated driver. Anyway, all right, you need to find a few infected machines on a large network. So how would you do that? This is what live response is for. Live response you can do over the network quickly with a small amount of data. This is what Velociraptor and live response are for, running a script on all the machines to collect some reasonable amount of data, like a list of all the files and registry keys. These other two things are both too big and heavy, too much data and too hard to analyze when you get the data. All right. All right, you found child pornography. Now what do you do? You're done. Your investigation is now over. Whatever you thought you were doing, forget it. You hand it over to the FBI. Get rid of it. That stuff is illegal to see, illegal to own. You can't keep the evidence you gathered. Whatever your investigation was, it's over. This is more important than whatever you thought you were doing. And you send it all to the FBI and wash your hands of it. You don't want to have anything to do with this. As you can see with Trump and the Epstein files, the punishment for this stuff is extreme. You don't want to be anywhere near it. You got to leave it to trained federal agents. All right, your investigation is going to go to court and you need complete evidence. So what should you collect? Yeah, everything. hard disk and RAM image, you might do a live response too, but that's the point. These two together are pretty much everything. Hard disk and RAM image. Live response is not bad either, but in principle, the RAM image includes the same as the live response. Anyway, that's complete evidence. You only do that when you have to, because it's a lot of work, but then you have the whole story if you're going to court. So a jealous husband wants evidence from his wife's laptop and asks you to gather. Now what do? This also is a true story. One of my students called me. A client came in with this request. That's right, none of this. This is America. Women have rights. Maybe in Saudi Arabia, a husband can authorize investigating his wife's laptop, but not in America. You need her permission. And if you don't get it, you're opening yourself up to a world of trouble. So I had a student call me, and he said, this guy asked me, and I said, whatever you do, don't do that. He said, well, I wasn't sure, so I quoted a really high price, and he went away. And I said, well, that'll do. At least you didn't do it. All right. Just on the hour. Let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll pick up. It's 11:12. I'll be back. I'm going to stop the recording.